So I'm a little surprised here by a move that Jason Kenney is still going through with. So a couple days ago, Jason Kenney ended up saying that he was going to be challenging Trudeau's Emergencies Act legally. So now that it's been removed, it's interesting that he's come out and he's actually said that he's still going to go through with the challenge despite that it's been lifted. And this will be interesting because I feel like it'll give us a better insight into how these acts should be used and may even clarify their use for future. So it might add more restrictions into how they're being used because this wasn't really an emergency. It might clarify that little gray area and the legality of how he's done this. So the interesting thing is Alberta will be. I'll just say it here. Alberta will proceed in its request for a judicial review of the federal government's use of the Emergency Act against trucker convoy protests. Premier Jason Kenney said. Jason Kenney said Wednesday, rising in the legislature to address what he called one of the most obvious overreaches of government power in my lifetime. Kenney said the fact the act was revoked earlier in the day is irrelevant. So this is interesting. He is very gung-ho about this, and I think he wants clarity as to why he was able to use these Emergencies Act the way that he did. And I think most Canadians would like to know exactly how this was implemented in the way that it was, because the week where it was in place, there should have been debates already starting. But the debates didn't start happening until just before or just after he had the vote with 185 to 151. So now with this in play, I think Jason Kenney is going to end up making it so that there's going to be more restrictions on how they have to use these emergency acts, or at least that's what I'm hoping from this. Because otherwise, what's the point in the legal challenge if there's no punishment or no clarifications involved, right? What, just other than wasting taxpayer money. So let's continue with what Jason Kenney was saying. So that does not change the profound concerns of Canadians, of Albertans and this assembly with this unnecessary, unjustified, and disproportionate use of arbitrary police power in our lifetime with no good reason. Kenney said there was never an emergency that justified the act's extraordinary powers. He pointed out that the border blockade at Coutts Alta was cleared before the act was brought in. He said Ottawa police had plenty of laws that prevented semi-trailer rigs from being parked on the streets of downtown Ottawa. He goes on to say, "We had no shortage of law. What we had was a shortage of enforcement." And on Twitter, Kenney called the lifting of the act a humiliation for those who supported it. The opposition, the NDP, said the blockade at Coutts, which lasted more than 2 weeks, was a failure of the province's United Conservative Party government to uphold the law. So, does he not see the hypocrisy here? Why is he calling out Alberta's government and not Trudeau's? Because, it's the same thing. Their protest lasted 2 weeks, but Kenney got it done before needing even any kind of Emergency Act powers. But Trudeau couldn't get anything done without the Emergency Act powers. It was like it was purposefully done in such a way where he could get the financial powers of the Emergencies Act permanently in place. So I'm hoping that's another thing that Jason Kenney brings up during the challenge. I hope he has to get him to admit something to do with those financial powers and what they're at now, what their status is like, and how they're different from before. We need to know what those changes brought forth. So somebody tried to do their typical little spin on things, and a justice critic, Irfan Sabir, said in a statement, "Promises of yet another trip to federal court are nothing more than Kenney trying to distract Albertans from the fact that 2 of his UCP MLAs actively encouraged that illegal blockade, which caused almost $800 million in damage to the Alberta economy." Of course, they have to use inflammatory words like damage, even though all it did was prevent $800 million in trade, which finally got people to start listening, by the way. And included extremists who are alleged to have stockpiled weapons and conspired to murder police officers. So I've looked into that too. The guns were brand new, never used, never fired. I'm pretty sure that is just a scapegoat in this case, because there was nobody really trying to plan that, and anybody who was planning that was doing that on their own. It's like how Antifa joins other protests just to riot. You know what I mean? So now I'm very curious, because now the Canadian Civil Liberties Association also said that it's going to pursue its challenge in the court of the Emergency Act. And this will be very important, because it will literally define the legal threshold and constitutional issues for future times that this has to be brought up. So good on Jason Kenney for sticking to his guns on this one. I thought for sure he'd flop immediately as soon as the emergency powers kicked in. And good for the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. I'm very happy to see that they're not giving up on the fact that he used these powers even though he revoked them. We need clarification on what he's done with those powers, what powers are still in place that have been made permanent, at least according to Freeland, and we need to know if there's any punishments in line for Trudeau. Because if he used these unlawfully, like I could see, well, I mean, technically it's not unlawfully, but if he used these in an abusive manner, I feel like some sort of punishment needs to be put in place for this. But I will say this, good on Jason Kenney, good on the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, and I hope more provinces challenge him too. We need more people to challenge him because he's just not getting any pushback from majority of his supporters. And it's really sad to see. But I'd love to see what's still in place, what will be the limitations in the future, and what kind of legal precedents will they need in order to enact the Emergencies Act after it gets challenged. So fingers crossed Jason Kenney provides some results. If not, I still got to give him credit where credit's due, and he's sticking to his guns on this one. I thought he was going to cave with the mandates. He's still keeping those going. I thought he was going to cave here, but even though it's been revoked, he's still going. I know it's probably for him to try to save face because he's not the most respected man in Alberta, but he's doing a hell of a lot more than most other people are. So good on him. Good on him for this one. Anyways, guys, I'll see you all next time. Love you all. Bye-bye.